Thank you, Madam Secretary, for joining us today. While our time in Congress did not overlap for very long, I do know that you value the process and what we're doing today. I'm excited to work with you and to find common ground where we can. So thank you for joining us. I also wanted to call your attention to a few of Iowa's priorities that I think need some more attention than they have typically and historically gotten from HUD. Just started with a couple of statistics. According to the Census Bureau, about 60 million people live in rural areas. This is about a fifth of the population, and more than 95% of the country's land is classified as being rural. Much of the district I represent is rural. So my first question for you today is simple. Why do you not mention the word rural in your testimony that you submitted to this committee?
Why did I mention the word? I didn't mention a lot of words about a lot of things, but clearly rural communities are as important to me as urban communities. I know that most of the people in this country live in rural communities. I don't think I mentioned the word urban either.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that, because I think that we need to make sure that we are not leaving them behind in these discussions. I'd like to see you prioritize rural areas as we're having a lot of these discussions. I was compelled by another phrase that you used as well, a good jumping off point for working together. The budget is more than a list of numbers, a reflection of the values and priorities. I know you mentioned that again in your opening testimony as well, so thank you for that. And I do think that there are opportunities to prioritize rural communities where the populations have declined, but opportunity abounds, much like it does in urban areas. So I'm inspired to hear you talk about some of those opportunities. I think really it does come down to housing availability. I wanted to go about talking today about Jones County specifically. It's an area that would really welcome a lot of young families attempting to move for work, and rural communities simply need the workforce, but they don't necessarily have the housing needed to support the growth. So the housing crisis isn't just about having a roof available. It's also about the community's ability to develop economically and grow. And scarce housing means farmland country in Iowa struggles to attract the workforce it needs. The largest town in Jones County is Anamosa, about 4,500 people who live, work, and play there. And then on the other spectrum, in Jones County, we have Onslow, which only has about 200 people, and Morley, which only has about 115 people. So, this obviously isn't unique to Jones County. It's a challenge for all of the rural areas in our country that I represent as well. Worth, Almaquee, Poweshiek, and every county in between that is rural. So I just want to make sure that you will commit to us today to ensure that as we're having these discussions, that HUD doesn't leave behind rural communities and focuses on them. Just as we would prioritize urban communities, we need to prioritize rural communities.
You have my absolute word, and let me reassure you that I certainly do want to work with you. And I do want to just mention to you that in the American Jobs Plan, the president has put in $2 billion for rural housing programs between HUD and USDA. And so it's not that they've been forgotten. And if you feel that way, I'm so very sorry. I want to work with you. So I am happy to engage in any conversation because I understand the importance. I mean, most of the broadband money that we're putting is going into rural communities and into underserved communities. So I am more than happy to have that conversation with you.
Yeah, I would say that's obviously the intent in many of these things, but it doesn't always, intent is not always reality in how those things are carried out. So I would ask your commitment today to making sure that your staff and those who work in your department follow through with that as well, and do prioritize our rural communities so that they are not forgotten in this process.
If you're asking me to say yes, the answer is yes.
That's all I need. Thank you very much, Madam Secretary, and I yield back. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.